Lazy Saturday afternoon. As an 11-year-old kid, I'm watching my dad watch a movie on TV. Of course, back then, we didn't have DVDs or pen drives or Netflix. The movie was rented. He was watching it on a VHS cassette player. What's the movie he's watching? He's watching Top Gun, where Tom Cruise, who is the lead actor, is playing this daring fighter pilot. As an 11-year-old kid, I am watching this with awe. Seeing Tom Cruise pilot that amazing jet, making amazing and daring moves, dogfighting with other pilots, and I'm simply amazed. I'm blown away. I'm thinking, this is what I want to do with the rest of my life. I want to be a fighter pilot. And as time goes by, as a kid, especially I'm from Sri Lanka, so whenever you go to a party, a birthday party, or a relative's place or something, the first thing, or in most cases, some of these people tend to ask you, okay, what do you want to be, son? What do you want to be when you grow up? And the first words which were out of my mouth was always, I want to be a fighter pilot. I want to be in the Air Force. It was such a cool thing for me back then. See, most of us take that first step or start thinking about something we want to do with the rest of our life at a very early age. And, for someone it might be seeing some person driving a really cool car and thinking, I want to have that cool car someday. I want to work with cars, or I want to be around cars all my life. Or you might see something on a stage play, on a drama, and you think, this is what I want to do with my life. For most of us, we take that first step into thinking of what we want to do with the rest of our lives as children. But as most of you already know, as we grow up, as time progresses, things change. We no longer end up doing or, wanting to do what we initially thought we were going to actually do with our lives. So, I'm asking you guys a question. Do you think discovering what you want to do with your life, your career, your purpose, is that straightforward? Has that been straightforward for you? Have you ever wondered whether you're actually in the right career for yourself? Do you feel stuck? Do you feel like this is not what I'm meant to do with my life? Do you feel like you're stuck in a rat race? If you're any one of those people, today's podcast will be really interesting to you. Because today, I'm going to talk about my own personal career journey, where I started, what I went through, and where I ended up. And towards the end of it, I'm going to talk to you about what are some of the approaches you can take when you're trying to figure out your life's purpose or your career. What are some of the things you can do to make that discovery process a little bit more smoother? Today, I'll be breaking this podcast into two parts because there's a lot of content I want to cover. So I hope you find this episode useful. I'm excited to share this information with you. So I hope you enjoy it. Welcome to Motivation Unleashed. So getting back to my journey, as a kid growing up in Sri Lanka, it was tough because we never had access to the technology or the information which modern day generations have access to. It was quite a basic life back then. And some of those things are actually good because we enjoyed and we explored. We played outside. We had so many things which kids, the modern day generation, children in the modern day, do not seem to have or do not seem to enjoy. But so my very first dream, as I said at the start, was to be a fighter pilot as a kid. And children, a lot of the older generation tend to coach the children back then on what they think is right. And the mindset which most Sri Lankans had back in the day was, if you want to be successful, you need to go to school, you need to get good grades, and you need to get to university. And then, if all goes well, you should aim to become an engineer or a doctor. And this is the advice which I used to constantly get from my parents, my uncles, my cousins, anyone basically who was older than me. This was the career advice which was given to me. So I thought, okay, maybe I'll become an engineer. I mean, I didn't really have an understanding of what an engineer was, although, yeah, and what I imagined was, because I was a kid growing up in the 80s, I used to imagine maybe it's one of those people you see in the movies, tinkering with gadgets and doing cool things and making a difference in the world. So I thought, you know what, maybe I should strive to be an engineer. But as most of us know, life never gives you what you think you're going to get. So as a kid, I was pretty bad with my studies. I struggled a lot. I dealt with a tough circumstances as a kid growing up due to different things, which obviously I don't want to get into. But yeah, I was pretty distracted as a kid, pretty stubborn, as most children are. And I didn't really focus on my studies. So I gradually, over time, as I became a teenager and into the later years, I did start falling back quite badly in my studies. And there was a point where I used to barely get through my exams, not studying, and I'm thinking to myself even now how much I could have done if I actually did study and spend the time doing it. But yeah, it was really tough, and it came to a point where I kind of decided, no, I don't want to keep doing this anymore. I don't want to go to school. I really didn't have a focus. I really didn't have a purpose in my life. But towards the later stages in school, something really cool happened, was that they actually started introducing computers into a subject or a curriculum. So as kids, we got like half an hour, I think, once a week to go into the computer lab, which had some Commodore 64s, I think, single color screen computers with a ridiculously low amount of RAM and storage and all of that. I mean, you can't even compare it. I think the smartwatches now are 1,000 times more powerful than the computers back then. But yeah, we got a chance to go to computer, and I instantly connected. Obviously, again, me being me, I connected for the wrong reasons, which was to play computer games. But they did teach us a bit of basic programming. I think it was Q Basic. And, they used to give us a little bit of games to play. And I fell in love with computers. Obviously, it was brand spanking new. It was a new subject. Most of the schools in our country didn't have it, except for the elite few. I was lucky enough to go into an elite school. And it was like, I wanted to get my hands on a computer, but I never could afford to get one. But luckily, over time, one of my cousins who were living in the US actually gave me a hand-me-down. He had one of his old, I think, Toshiba 386 laptops, which he gave to me, and I started tinkering around with it. I started installing software. The internet started happening back then. The connection speed slowly allowed us to actually download stuff. So I learned a lot using that computer, and I kind of fell in love with the computer. But even though I mostly spend my energy on gaming and tinkering with software, I really didn't have a focus, or I really didn't figure out what I wanted to do. So eventually I decided to leave school. I had the option of doing my higher studies, which obviously I didn't want to, because I did not enjoy studying, did not enjoy school. So I decided to drop out of school. And as soon as I dropped out of school, what do we all need? We need money. So, my parents said, you need to find work, you need to get a job. All right. So the first thing I did was I started looking for work. And for some reason, and completely unplanned and completely random, I ended up finding this job selling computers. Interesting enough, I was an introvert in school, but for some reason, once I started getting into that job, it was completely outside my comfort zone. I kind of enjoyed working around computers. It was just selling computers. It was a company which was buying computers from Taiwan, and then we used to rebrand them and sell them. So I slowly started developing my sales skills, and I really enjoyed what I was doing. So I was making some good money. And back in the day, they weren't paying us a lot, but I used to make a lot of money in commissions. And as a kid who was just out of school making that kind of money, I was like, I was having the time of my life. I was the most popular kid, even though most of my friends were still in school. I was still the most popular kid because I had the dough, and I used to take them around, take them to restaurants, eat, drink. It was a lot of fun. I had a lot of friends, but at the same time, I ended up busting all my money. So after a while, me being me, I got bored with that job. I did that job for a little over a year, made some good money, and then I decided, you know what, I want to try something different. I'd been researching and experimenting and trying to learn a bit of graphic designing. While I was working, I actually dabbled in a bit of graphic design. I went for a few classes, and I kind of decided, hey, this is something I want to try, give a go, because it was pretty cool. Even when I was learning graphic designing, they used to play music, and I used to get into designing, and I think we used Corel Draw and Adobe Photoshop and some of these tools, and Adobe Illustrator, if I'm not mistaken. And I used to get lost in it. Like, used to put music on, and I used to just get into it. I used to really enjoy, and I mean, I wouldn't consider myself a great graphic designer, but I was average. I was maybe a little bit more than average. So after that, I decided, I'm going to give graphic designing a try. So I joined this business, and it was a small setup and a small IT firm where they were doing all these graphic designs and web designing and all of that. So I dabbled in that for a while. I tried my hand at, while doing that job, I also learned a bit of 3D animation, played around with that. Did that job for about a year, but the pay was pretty terrible, and they were, they were pretty much using the people who were working for them and not giving them the right amount of pay. So eventually, I ended up leaving the job, and then I transitioned into another job, and this time as a web designer, because I had gained some experience working as a web designer, which I enjoyed, and I kind of built up my career over time as a web designer, and I slowly rose up the ranks. I think I did the job for a couple of years, and I became a senior designer. I also got the chance to work with a lot of customers, interesting people. It was a lot of fun. Again, I used to waste all the money I used to make, but it was a lot of fun, a fun job, and we had a fun culture in that workplace. So I really enjoyed working there. At the same time, I decided, because I had some exposure to sales when I first started, I was thinking maybe I should give a shot at studying marketing. So I went into, paid some money, went into, I think it was CIM, certificate in marketing. I did that for a while. I was really good. I was really good with the studying, and I aced all the subjects, but me being me, after a while, I got bored with it. And then I dropped out of the classes again. And by now you might see this recurring pattern of me getting bored. But yeah, so I decided, I just don't want to do this. And I continue to work as a web designer. So I'm doing really well as a web designer. And then somewhere along the way, I transitioned into another company, and continue to do well. I rise up in the rank, and even in this company, as I'm doing the whole web designing work, I also get into a bit of UI design, get a bit, dabble in a bit of software application design, and all is good with the world. And by now you might be thinking, so this guy, who goes down the software path and the IT path, but wait, that's not what happens. So I decide that sitting in front of a computer every day, doing stuff day in, day out, is not what I want to do. And part of the reason why I decided that is because of some of the people I saw. in my workplace and in the industry. So I would see people who are like twice my age, sitting in front of a computer doing the same thing I'm doing. And I'm much better than these guys. Obviously, I'm younger. I'm more well versed with technology, and I figure things out. And I can see these guys struggling because when you keep doing the same thing over and over again for a number of years, obviously it takes its toll. You lose that passion, and as soon as a passion becomes a job, that's when it's not so rosy, or the grass is no longer the greener. So, but anyway, I decide I don't want to end up being this way. So what do? I decide I want to try something different. So another interest which I didn't speak about up until this point was that I had a passion for cars. All things cars, classic cars, sports cars, SUVs, you name it. And I'm thinking maybe I should try and get into that industry. So what do? I pay money, enroll into a very well-known, established engineering firm in Sri Lanka. I think it was called the German Technical Training Institute. And I take up a course as an automotive technician. So I start studying this, and believe it or not, I did this for 2 years, a little bit closer to 3 years. I learned about car engines. I learned how to take them apart. I learned about automotive electronics, everything you can imagine, anything and everything to do with a car. I learned about it. I aced all the subjects. I got distinctions. Because I was so passionate about it, I got through. I think the toughest subject for me was electronics, because there were so many formulas, and it just did my head in. But I managed to get through it. So after I got qualified, I did 2 levels and I became a qualified automotive technician. And then I decided I want to try an internship. So this is all happening while I'm doing my day job as a web and UI designer. And so my weekdays was at the job and my weekends was learning automobile engineering. And once I finished my studies, I decided I want to get an internship and work in a garage. So I go, and in Sri Lanka, if you tell someone that, and this is a sad thing about our country, because as soon as people think you go into trades and you start working in trades like a construction worker, a panel beater, car mechanic, they start thinking, oh, why are you doing that? They almost think of it as a downgrade. I guess part of the reason is because the pay is shit. Like people with those skills are not really valued, which is wrong, which it should be the other way around. But anyway, long story short, I take up an internship and I start working in this garage for a couple of months. And it's hard. The job is hard. It's physically demanding. It's a job. It's not as rosy as I imagined, right? You watch the Fast and the Furious, them tuning up their engines and fixing turbos and racing cars. It's none of that, right? It's the reality is much, much different than fantasy. So, and guess what I do? I decide, this is not for me. And then I just go on and go back to my day job, and I just focus on my day job. So after a while, I get bored, but then luckily for me, I get a chance in my company to actually lead a team. As a senior designer, lead a team and also take on some of their key accounts. So which also gets me pulled into project management, because bigger customers, bigger projects, it becomes more complex, right? So I get into that stuff and I have a knack for it, and I discover my ability to work with people, communicate with people, and mind you, I was an introvert at the start. So, and then I really enjoy the challenge, I enjoy managing the team, and I really excel in that career. And eventually I applied for another technological company. This company was more in the telecommunication side of things, on software. And I applied for a role as a business analyst, which is, anyone who's in IT knows what a business analyst is. So I thought, since I enjoy all this, maybe I'll dabble in business analysis. But anyway, I go into that role and they straight away say, you know what, there is this project management role, do you want to take it? And I'm like, yep, why not? And For about 5 years of my life, I end up in that company. So I transitioned from a project manager, senior project manager, and essentially after a while, I end up getting a chance to head the business unit. And my CEO, my boss at the day, he was a really good guy, advised me and helped me a lot, and he saw potential in me. So he actually gave me the chance to head that business unit. So lo and behold, I get into this whole new world of business and profit and loss and HR and marketing and sales. So I get involved in all of that, and I kind of realized most of the skills I learned over the years kind of helped me. It made me a much more effective project manager. It allowed me to, manage a software development company and, slowly build that business up. And I scaled that business up, right? So all that experience I had learned in the past actually became useful to me. So, and you'll think this is the end of the story, but trust me, it's not. There's more. So while all this is going on in my life, I decide that I enjoy what I'm doing. So I love building business. I love being involved in business. Rather than working in the business, I actually enjoy working on the business. What does that mean? That means that I enjoy more of the strategy side of things, working on the numbers, focusing towards growth and doing all that. So I decide I need to get a formal qualification around this stuff, right? I mean, I've had such diverse levels of experience. I felt that it was important for me to get some formal qualifications around business. So I decide with all the work experience and everything I had, I got the chance to get into a master's program, which I ended up doing. And it was about 2.5 to 3 years worth of study, and it was part-time because I was doing a full-time job during the weekdays, and Friday, Saturday, Sunday it was classes all days. So it was a lot of sacrifice, and I missed out quite a lot on my personal life, but it is something which I was so focused and determined to do that I actually ended up doing it. So 3 years of study, I was studying a course which was offered from a university in the UK. We had a flying faculty which used to come into Sri Lanka during the weekends, during Friday, Saturday, Sunday. They used to teach us and then fly off. So the biggest thing I found in that course was more than the content in the books. It was the experience which some of these lecturers shared. Some of them had been in business, some of them were directors, some of them had been entrepreneurs. It was really, I really enjoyed it. So lo and behold, 3 years shoot by and I get my qualification in masters, which I am so proud of even to this day. So while all this is going on, I'm still working in my job, and life happens to me as well. I find a beautiful woman and I get married. I have a daughter who becomes the center of my world, and my life goes on. And I'm happy in my career at this point. I'm quite satisfied. And once my master's was done, my wife asked me to actually consider maybe moving countries, and maybe consider migrating to a country like Australia or England or all of that. And up until that point, it was not something which I had considered or I wanted to consider. But things were getting fairly tough in Sri Lanka at that time. And I had a young family. I was concerned for the future of my daughter as well because of certain things which were happening, which obviously I don't want to go into too much detail into. But I kind of decided, I'll just give it a go. So I actually go through the process and I apply for my PR or permanent residency in Australia. I never really took it very seriously, but I went through the whole application process. I think it took a while. It took a little over 2 years, I believe, close to about 2 years. And I still go on with my life. I'm happy at this point. And at this point in my career, I'm thinking I should start my own business. And as you can probably understand, I did have a passion for sharing knowledge and, advising people and helping them through their own journeys. And I was thinking maybe I should start some kind of a business around it, something like maybe around lecturing, teaching, something like that. So I was working together while everything else was going on in my life. I was actually putting this plan together. But what happens is, so I build this, while I'm building up this business plan and I'm getting ready to launch it, I hear back from the Australian government saying that I've been offered a sponsorship to actually move to Melbourne. So that came as a complete shock to me, and it completely shocked my system because I was not really considering that as a serious option. Even though I had applied, I spent the money and I did all that, I never really considered it. Like, I guess being honest, I never really thought it'll actually come through. So, as you can probably understand, a person being in my situation, my whole world went into a total tailspin because, I mean, I understand I was in my 30s back then, and I was comfortable with my life, comfortable with my job, my career. I was looking at starting my own business, so it was an absolute whirlwind. So, the kind of person I am, I tend to make extreme decisions. So I decided that, and because my daughter, and this was mainly because my daughter was in the picture, but I decided that I'm actually going to make that move and, give Australia a go. So what happens? What happened next was a very humbling experience. I completely let go of my career. I left my job, and my CEO, my boss, was just beyond shocked that I'm actually trying to do this. And I sold everything I had owned, all my possessions, and it was very, very hard saying goodbye to people, goodbye to the things you build up over the years, and all those cars, the material possessions, like they were all pretty much gone in a span of about 2.5 months. Everything was gone. And then the other side of this is that it was such a humbling experience for me, because I realized how fragile life is and how change can happen in an instant, which was in a way eye-opening. But long story short, so I couldn't really take a lot of money with me because I still had my parents, my family living there. I couldn't really sell off some of the assets I had, some of the valuable assets I had. So what I ended up doing is I get some cash and pack a suitcase, and I moved to Melbourne. So I land in Melbourne, and it's completely different world, different experience altogether. Everything becomes new to me. I'm totally out of my comfort zone. Even doing something as simple as going to a store and buying food becomes a new experience. Driving a car becomes a new experience. I mean, if I compare it, it's almost like learning to walk again, learning to speak again, because everything's completely changed. And so I get to Melbourne, and then my next focus is, because my family's back in Sri Lanka, I'm like, yes, I need to actually start getting a job. And I came with this mindset that I've got all this experience, surely I've got a master's, I've got all these qualifications, and surely I'd be able to find a job real quick. And the reality turned out to be quite different, because I started applying. So I get myself into a shared house, and I'm renting a room, and I'm just staying in this room. And you can imagine, I sit in the morning, I start applying for jobs, and I till afternoon, and that would be my routine, rinse and repeat. And I understand that I had very limited money, so I was running out of money. There's added pressure there. But surprise, and anyone who's been through a migration journey will know this, I could not find a single job, not even a single interview. Because back in the day, the market was so competitive, and it was really hard. And I was applying for jobs in project management, project coordination, and there was a lot of competition in that space at that time. And whenever I did get in touch with the business, most of the time the business would say, oh, we can't really give you a chance because you need local experience. Which again is a bit of a paradox, because if you want me to gain local experience, you have to give me a chance to actually work on the job, right? I guess in hindsight, businesses just didn't want to spend the time or invest the time in someone they have no idea, no clue about, and it could be a big risk from a business perspective, right? And there's an impact there, because they would ideally want someone with local experience who can hit the ground running. So yeah, 2 months, 3 months go by, and I'm not able to find work. So at this point, I become increasingly frustrated, and as any migrant who's been through that journey will probably realize, I decide I need, and increasingly I'm missing my daughter. My daughter's around 1 year old, 1.5 years old at that point, and I'm just going crazy. I think I need to bring them in. And I need to do everything in my power to make that happen. So the interesting point is that when your back is against the wall, nothing is off the table. You become really focused. Either you become really focused or you panic and run away. So I decided to become laser focused, and I decided, I'm just going to try a different approach. So I printed out a bunch of CVs, and I started walking in all these shopping malls. looking for work. I thought I'll grab anything, a job in a warehouse, a job in a shop, retail shop, anything. So I completely reset my expectations and I started walking from shop to shop to shop. And I did this for a couple of days, and eventually I walked into a store which was dealing with telecommunication products, and I was lucky enough to meet with the store manager who was there. And I walked in, I used all the communication skills I had. I handed in my CV and I spoke a bit about, because I was coming back from a telecommunications experience around the software side of things. I kind of used that, leveraged that. And lo and behold, I walk out of the store, and 1 or 2 days later, I get called for an interview. So, which was amazing. So I go, I prepare, I practice, and I go for that interview. Long story short, after about a couple of interviews, I land the job. And this is a job in retail. I had never worked in retail ever in my life. All the work experience I had was B2B, as in business to business. So what happens next is quite interesting, because I start working a job in retail that is completely out of my comfort zone. It's a different beast altogether, because you're dealing with the end consumer. It's a face-to-face interaction all the time. And I struggled a lot at the start getting my head around it. It was challenging as well. There was challenging customers, and I was still trying to get my head around the culture, understand the accents. Sometimes I couldn't even figure out what people were speaking, but eventually I nailed that job, and I worked in that role for about 6 months. I start hitting my sales targets. I start selling my accessories. So this is where I kind of reflect back on that very first job I did in sales, and where I learned all those skills, right? So I continue to leverage those skills. And about 6 months into the role, I get a chance to transition into a role as a business specialist in the store. And then I kind of work on that role. And all this time, while everything's going on, I still continue to look for jobs in my role, all right? So I continue to network. I reach out to a few recruitment consultants, see if they can help me. And anyway, interesting enough, there's a gentleman who walks into the store I'm working in, and he turned out to be a business owner. So I just get into talking. I'm obviously trying to set him up with a mobile package. I'm trying to sell him a bunch of stuff. But at the same time, I get talking to him, and then he asks a bit about myself, and I kind of share my story. And he's like quite amazed, and he's like, hey, I have this business which is in supply chain and in software. Is it something you'd be interested in? So I'm like, hell yeah. So I eventually give him a CV. Obviously, I had a full-time job at a very big telecommunications company back then. So I really didn't want to just jump into a startup or a small business without actually understanding what I'm getting into. So I actually tried out the job for a while during, between my shifts. And I decided, I'm going to take a chance, because I saw potential in that industry, and I saw potential in myself to get back into my roots as well. So after a year of working in this telecommunications company, they're quite shocked that I'm leaving such a big company, full-time job. I decided to take a leap of faith, and I get into this job. So everything's new for me in this industry, and I had to learn everything from scratch, from processing sales orders to boxing up orders to shipping stuff to going out and seeing customers. So I raised my hand up for everything. Obviously, this was a small business, so the good thing with when you join a small business is you get a lot of chances to learn, and I got a really good chance to learn a lot of things. So it was really tough. The pay was really low, but I learned everything I can. So I did that job for 3 years, and during that time, I worked on my other goals. I started networking in that industry, because the more I learned about the supply chain industry, the more I fell in love with it. And I just kept continuing to network, meet people, and grow. So every time, my boss said, hey, can you do this? I'm like, yeah. Do you want to go for this networking event? Yes. Do you want to learn about configuring devices or whatever? Yes. So I said yes to everything. And over the 3 years, I really became well versed in my role. I got promoted once or twice, and then I transitioned in that role. So during the networking events, I come across this other bloke who's actually running a bigger business, and he's also in supply chain and robotics. So I network with him, and I say, if there's, I think, it was a while back, and I said, if there's anything, just reach out, just let me know. And he remembered me. So I think 1 or 2 years after that interaction, he actually reached out to me and said, hey, look, I've got this job. If you're interested, you can take it. I feel you're overqualified for this role, but I'll give you a chance. So I actually said, you know what, I'll take the chance. So I actually ended up joining that business after a round of interviews, and I ended up working with a great team. And I never looked back. So I transitioned into that job as a support engineer. And then I had to really brush up on my technical skills, learn and understand configuring with devices and all of that. And a little bit down the track, I got a chance to transition into a project management role because they openly knew that I was an experienced project manager. So I worked in the project management role for a couple of months, and then I got a chance to I was promoted to project lead, where I was handling all the projects in this company in my space. So another year and a half into the role, I actually transitioned into the head of in that business unit. So, and I take ownership of all the P&L, the business side of things, the marketing, the sales, and all of that. So, yeah, so that's been my career journey thus far. So, I mean, what is the main thing I can share with you about my experience? I think when I look back at my life, and this stuff I shared with you is like over the course of 30 years of my life. So it's really interesting, right? Sometimes we do something, we get into a job or we get into something and we feel that it's really not where you want to be. But understand that's the biggest learning I've had is that all those jobs I did throughout my career, all those things I learned, everything helped me at some point in my life. Even that automobile engineering course which I did helps me to this day, especially if I'm buying a car, if I'm troubleshooting a car, even in my own cars. If there's a problem, I can actually fix it, right? So I actually have an understanding of what the problems are. But understand that everything you learn in your life will have some form of value to you. And you always need to go with the learning mindset and be open to change. I think that's the biggest thing with me. I mean, I'm the kind of person, I always look to challenge myself. Maybe at the start of my career, that was not the case. It was me just getting bored. But eventually what I found out about myself throughout that career journey is that I'm a person who requires to be challenged. I need to challenge myself continuously. And I think I've found that in where I am at in my life today, right? So if there's one advice I can give you is to go with an open mind. And even if you feel like you're in a career sometimes which is not adding value to you, trust me, that job is actually adding value to you. Because if I look at all the sales experience, the development experience, the project management experience, the team leading experience, the business management experience, all of that I'm still leveraging and I'm still using to this day, right? So, and the other thing I can tell you is that your career or your life's purpose will never be straightforward. We all think that it'll be like this straight line, but trust me, the line is something like, it's chaos. It's never straightforward. I mean, that's what I'm going to say. And some people might be lucky enough to figure out what they do, and then it's like a linear path, and they transition into their to their career and life purpose, and hats off to them. And I know a lot of people who are like that. But for most of us, I think a majority of us and a majority of the people I speak to, their experience is very similar to mine. Like it's never straightforward, and it's never as smooth as we expect it to be, right? So I'm going to touch on a few more other things around what you can do, tips and tricks around what you need to look out for as you're working on your career, especially if you're someone young, or if you're someone who's stuck in your career and you feel like you are not making progress, or you're not where you're meant to be, or you want to change careers. In the next podcast episode, I actually plan to give you some more advice around that and what you can do to make that process easier and just kind of try and figure out your way, right? So that has been my career journey so far. I mean, there was a lot I covered there in terms of my personal story. I hope you found some kind of value, and it made you, at least if it started making you think and made you realize that, oh, you know what, maybe I'm not the only one and I actually have hope. I think that's the end game for me. And if that was achieved, this episode of my podcast has been a success. So thank you everyone for listening. I am also on socials, on Instagram, on TikTok, at motivated.unleashed. You can also follow me and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Have a great day everyone, and stay motivated and always unleash the power of your mind. Have a great day.